Welcome to a long time ago. My name's Martin, and with me, as always, is Adam. How you doing, Adam?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you.
Good.
We're back again for our part two of our, meaning my top 11 Clone Wars episodes from Star Wars: The Clone Wars. This week, we will be talking about season two, episode five, Landing at Point Rain. Just before we go into it, just a reminder: this is my favorite 11 episodes of the Clone Wars.
Yeah,
It's not Adam's. Adam has seen all of the Clone Wars,
I've
and
seen
he's
most of
probably
the Clone Wars. I've seen. Sorry to interrupt, but I got to series five, I think. I haven't seen all of five, six, and seven. I've just seen the ones that you recommended, which is most of them.
yeah, yeah. I think
But
the ones I've picked out, the ones in those seasons that you haven't seen that were worth watching, that you've seen though, haven't you? Because
yeah,
yeah, that's good. So this will be probably the second time Adam's seen these episodes that I've listed.
yeah,
Now, obviously, there probably are other episodes that people might think are better, but this is just my personal top 11.
yeah.
And we're not doing it in number order. So we're not
We're
going
not
from
counting
11
down.
down to one. No, not
No.
counting down. We're just going to do it in order of what's the word I'm
Release.
looking for, Adam? Release. Thank you.
Yeah.
Landing at Point Rain, season two, episode five. Before I go on forever, Adam, what did you think?
Very enjoyable. Yeah. We see it from like three different perspectives, don't we?
We
So
do.
from Ahsoka and Anakin and Obi-Wan's perspective, as they're all making their attack on the oh, I forget what it was now.
Geonosis.
Yeah, but what it was like a wasn't
That
a
was a weapons
dam.
factory. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, no, yeah, the wall. Yeah, sorry,
the
the
wall.
defensive wall.
Yeah, yeah. So they were all making their attacks from different points. Um, yeah, it was an enjoyable episode. But for everyone listening, Martin's notes are a lot longer than mine. So if we want to make this a 15-minute episode, we better get into that.
Yeah, well, I won't rush through them, but I'll be as quick as possible. Going back to what you said, it is a story that's told from three different characters, not necessarily their point of view, but it tells the story of three characters in one story. And you
Yeah.
have, and I think whether this is something that I've picked up, I don't know, but I think this is what definitely the case. I think you've got Obi-Wan, and his story is told in a genre of a war film. You've got the over the shoulder, shaky cam, tense. We're going to get overrun battle
Mm.
scenes, which are absolutely fantastic. Then you've got Ki Adimundi, who I'd say his story was kind of a horror genre,
Okay.
especially when you have those scenes in the caves and he's taking on the Geonosians. And then you have Anakin and Ahsoka, which is more of an action adventure genre,
Mm.
banter, taking out the droids, that kind of thing. So
The competition between them as well of
yeah, yeah. I
who
mean, the
who's getting.
competition, yeah, I do want to talk about the competition quite a lot because, but we'll come back to that.
Okay, yeah,
But just I'll fire off a few bullet points. Obviously, we're back to Geonosis
yeah.
from episode two, Attack of the Clones. I'd argue that the battle scenes in this are better than they are in episode two. I
I could
think,
probably agree with that. Yeah,
yeah. I mean
for the most
the
part.
yeah, absolutely. I mean the battles in the cruisers and the what with the Y wings and the drop ships and the tank drop ships. I mean, it's frenetic at one
Mm.
point. There's ships being blown down, landing in the and getting destroyed in the ground. There's other ships colliding with other ships. There's
Yeah.
clones flying out the sides of the ships. There's Jedi being really badly injured. I mean,
Mm.
it's absolutely, as I say, frenetic. It's absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant, brutal and hard hitting. I've written in my notes. As I mentioned slightly before, there's an over the shoulder documentary style shaky cam style they've used in this episode for most of the scenes. And if you think for an animated show, I'm not sure if there were other shows at this time, 2009 ish, using this sort of camera work. I don't know of any, but I mean, it looks movie quality.
Yeah.
It looks absolutely brilliant, and I can only guess to do that in animation must be really, really difficult. So
Possibly. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know anything about animation, but
No.
I know enough to, when I watch it though, to know that's really impressive what
Yeah.
they've done there. Admiral Laren's in this episode.
I put
He's
that in
obviously
my notes. So that's the
yep,
guy we were talking about in the
Andor.
Andor, when we did the Andor podcast.
That's right. Yeah,
So he was on the
Republic.
Republic side, yeah,
Yeah,
to begin
yeah,
with, and
yeah.
then joins the Empire.
Well, the Republic becomes
Becomes
the
the
Empire,
Empire,
so
yeah.
I don't
Okay,
suppose he
so he
changes.
didn't sort of,
No,
yeah.
he
Okay,
didn't
makes
change
sense.
allegiances or anything. Just quickly, that cave scene where Ki-Adi-Mundi and his squad of clones are working their way through to the other end, and they're having to take on the Genosians. Whew, I mean, that was brutal. There's burning, there's decapitation, there's
Yeah,
close range double tapping, there's clones being ripped apart and pulled into the darkness. I mean, again,
yeah,
I mean, look at the smile on my face.
full on.
I was loving it. I thought this is absolutely brilliant, and it's quite horrific what's going on screen. You know, there's actually blood and guts or anything,
For
but
no, but for a animated show,
yeah,
yeah,
it's it kind of shows it really showed the horrors of war, if you like, for in an animated show. So I again really impressed with that. At the beginning of the episode, you see the Jedi Masters planning the operation, and there's a hologram communique with Yoda, Mace Windu, and in the background you see Palpatine, and you know, it has a couple of lines in it, and you can see he's manipulating the situation, and you know that Mr. Palpatine over here, fan, you know, I was loving that, so that was great. Anytime they sort of insert that in, I think it's fantastic because it adds to the overall story. You really see in this episode Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship as friends and brothers. And it's very apparent in this episode. The banter that they have, the worry that Anakin obviously has when he hears that Obi-Wan's injured. I thought, again, scenes like this in the Clone Wars really help the situation in episode 3 when
yeah.
obviously they're fighting each other.
I was going to say we spoke on a little bit about it last week, didn't we?
We did
in the first
yeah,
part.
that's right.
It sort of adds that meat to it.
Yeah, that was brilliant. There's a couple of characters who turn up quite a few times in all the seasons or in the show in general. A couple of clones called Waxer and Boyle. They're quite funny too. Some, you know, the fact that they were bemoaning the fact that they always get sent on the dangerous missions, and you know, he said this is dangerous. You know, try and get back to the square. That's going to be dangerous. You know, that was brilliant.
Yeah. I'll have to look out for them. Are they in more of your episodes?
I don't think they're actually in any of more of my picks. No.
Well, I'm sure I'll get around to watching it all again at some point. So
yeah. I think I mentioned it briefly earlier. The square that they create with all of the crashed ships and the tanks, and they're defending from each direction from the Genosians and the battle droids. I mean, that couple of seconds, or it was about 20 seconds of them just closing in, and it's absolutely tense as anything. You know, you can see the desperation of the clones trying to hold back the separatists, and when finally the Y-wings turn up and rescue them just at the last moment when they're about to be overrun, and Obi-Wan just about manages to get up off the floor and ignite his lightsaber. And if you didn't know any better, you could think, oh, this is his last stand. A lot of positives about this episode, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Go on.
So I just wanted to ask, like, as somebody who's pretty well versed in the prequels and whatnot, I'm going to need reminding what the beef was with the Genosians.
Well, the Genosians, they were part of the Separatists, so they were with Count Dooku, and they also have droid factories. So they're one of the species who build the droids. Yeah. So in order, obviously, the Republic feel in their war plans that they'd have to disrupt their droid manufacturing in order to get an advantage in the war. So That would be the main reason. But I think the fact that the Clone Wars started on that planet because of what happened in episode 2, it's special importance, that planet.
Right.
And maybe not this podcast, but there's a lot more information you find out about Geonosis in the future in Rebels, and it's actually quite interesting stuff, because obviously the Geonosians were the one who designed the Death Star originally.
No, didn't know that. I don't think.
Well, in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, the leader of the Geonosians gives Count Dooku the blueprints to the Death Star, and Count Dooku takes them away and says, "Oh, I'll give these to my master." So that's how Palpatine gets the plans to the Death Star. So again, little tidbits there for you.
Yeah. So I was going to ask where it was in the timeline as well. So this is all after, because the Clone Wars takes place completely between episode 2 and 3, doesn't it? With a little bit just sort of around 3 and after, I suppose.
Yes, a little bit just after 3, but there's 3 years between 2 and 3, so our Clone Wars take place in roughly 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But the last thing I want to talk about in this episode, and it's my main takeaway from this episode, and the reason I love it so much, is this one scene. Now, I've probably seen this Clone Wars episode more than any other Clone Wars episode. It's not my favorite Clone Wars episode, but it's the sort of thing I like to go to, because it gives, as you said earlier, it gives you the wars in Star Wars, and I really like that. But this one scene that I love. Now, obviously, we remember all through the episode, right at the beginning, about halfway through, you have Anakin and Ahsoka comparing the number of kills, if you like, that they've had. I mean, they're careful to say droids and not Geonosians, I hasten to add, in the episode, but they're obviously competing who gets the most. And they're doing this all the way through, and they're right at the end as Obi-Wan's been helped onto the shuttle with Ki-Adi-Mundi, who are both injured at this point. Anakin and Ahsoka are saying, "Oh, I got 55," and Ahsoka says, "I got 60." And Anakin can't take the fact that he's lost. And in the background, you see Ki-Adi-Mundi listening to what they're saying. And just as they're about to fly off, in what I would say, and I'm not overstating this, in one of the most affecting pieces of dialogue I've ever heard in Star Wars, Ki-Adi-Mundi just out of nowhere says,
65, Skywalker.
Sorry?
My total, 65. So what do I win?
My everlasting respect, Master Mundi.
Oh.
That is a gift Anakin rarely bestows, I assure you.
3 things that I get from this scene. The first is it completely brings Anakin back down to earth. It reminds him of who he is, what he's meant to do, and why he's there. The second thing it does, it reminds them both that what they're doing is not the way of the Jedi, if you like, the old school Jedi, and that they should have more respect for the life that they're taking. Even though they've got to do it, they should have more respect for it. As Mace Windu says in episode 2,
"We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers."
We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers. And at this point, it perhaps looks like they've forgotten that, Anakin and Ahsoka. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, it shows us as the audience what what the war is doing to the Jedi.
Yeah.
And it once again gives us subtle hints about what's to come in the future. Of course, we know what's going to happen in the future, and we know what's going to happen to Anakin, and we know what's going to happen to Ahsoka. But it gives us that, as we said last week, more meat on the bone to the overall story of the prequel films, the Clone Wars, the saga in general. And it's little moments like this that I think, thank you, George. Thank you, Dave. This is why I watch Star Wars. This is why I love Star Wars. And I know it's such a little scene, but I mean, I can't say enough about that little scene, that little bit of dialogue.
Yeah.
And it really shows Ki-Adi-Mundi, again, as you said, we don't really get to see from these characters. We get, I think Kit Fisto doesn't have a line in the original, in the sequel, in the prequel trilogy. And I think Ki-Adi-Mundi only speaks in episode 1 ever so briefly, and perhaps in episode 2 ever so briefly. And you're getting more character development for these background characters and important Jedi, because they're on the Jedi Council at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love this episode. It's not my number one favorite episode,
but it's
probably
right
not
up there.
but
Top
it's
3?
right up there. Top 5 at the moment. It's difficult.
Top 11.
Do you know what I'm going to have to do, Adam? I think when we've watched them all 11 and we talked about all 11, I'll perhaps say, right, I'll give you a top 5 maybe, because it's really difficult for me. I'm already questioning my top 11 list that I've given you.
Oh no.
But the thing is, if we record these quickly, then I'm not going to be able to change my mind, so it gives you a bit of an incentive.
Okay. Well, going back to what you were saying, I think we might come back to point 2 a little bit more of what where you said there's a lot of times where we find out that they're doing things that aren't really the Jedi way, because I think we mentioned that in episode 1 and part 1 as well of this list. So I do think the Clone Wars, like you said, has made that quite apparent for the Jedi, that they are becoming soldiers almost.
And the fact that we're doing this in broadcast order, we might actually see that firsthand, thinking about it. Not necessarily, but possibly. So that'd be interesting, actually.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think that will do it for this week then. Let us know what you think about this episode, if it's up there as one of your favorite Clone Wars episodes. If you leave that in the comments, that'd be great. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
Bye.